This House will come back to order. House will come back to order. Mr. Clerk, you want to ring the bell? All right, we're about to go back to the rules calendar. We are about to go back to the rules calendar. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 274.
House Bill 274 by Representative Ballinger, the 23rd, to be entitled an act to amend Article 2, Chapter 11, Title 15 of the Official Code of Georgia Anteta relating to Juvenile Courts Administration, so as to provide for a salary supplement for certain juvenile court judges. This bill having referred to the Committee on Juvenile Justice, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Mandy Ballinger to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As many of y'all know, all our alternative courts in the state have really done a lot for our people and Georgians across the state. And we pay our superior court judges a supplement to administer those administrative courts. And this bill allows for the same that the superior courts are getting. It allows for that same bonus to our juvenile court judges who are handling an alternative court. It just has to do with judge parity. I'm happy to answer any questions.
You do not have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge your favorable consideration.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? Chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? The House of Representatives is in session. Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the passage of House Bill 274, the ayes are 137, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 1103.
House Bill 1103 by Representative Chokas, the 138th, to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 42-167 of the Official Code of Georgia Anteta relating to separately stating fees in a rental agreement, so as to revise the definition of heavy-duty equipment motor vehicle. This bill I refer to the Committee on Motor Vehicles. That committee recommends that this bill do pass.
Chair recognizes Chairman Chokas to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring before you House Bill 1103. This measure was brought to me by the rental equipment industry. Currently, under statute, rental equipment companies can put a line item on their billing invoices for a pro rata share of ad valorem taxes on equipment weighing 5,000 pounds or more. This measure simply brings that weight threshold down from 5,000 pounds to 1,500 pounds. That's all that this legislation does. I'll be happy to answer any questions. If there are none, I ask for your favorable consideration.
You do not have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask for your favorable consideration.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the passage of House Bill 1103, the ayes are 126, the nays are 12. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 1224.
House Bill 1224 by Representative Martin of the 49th be entitled an act to amend Chapter 5 of Title 48 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to ad valorem taxation of property, so as to revise the language required to be included in the notices of current assessments. This bill I refer to the Committee on Ways and Means. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Martin to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, every year from our local taxing jurisdictions, we get ad valorem tax notices, and depending on the type of property you have ways that you can appeal that. If we pass this bill, what this does is enables the taxpayer to have another option. If you're the owner of tangible personal property, which would be machinery in your manufacturing plant, in excess of $200,000, you will be given an option to appeal that to a hearing officer with appeal to the Superior Court. Today, you do not have that option. You either have to go to the Board of Equalization or to arbitration, and that slows down the courts because typically three homeowners don't know the details about the complexity that may be in this type of tangible personal property. So, Mr. Speaker, what this aims to do is give taxpayers more options for appeal, smooth out the process, and help counties get their tax digest right sooner. With that, I ask the House favorable consideration for this taxpayer-friendly measure. If there are no questions, I'll yield the well.
You have no questions. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the passage of House Bill 1224, the ayes are 147, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 1428.
House Bill 1428 by Representative Attestation of the 104th to be entitled an act to amend the official code of Georgia annotated to revise, modernize, correct errors or omissions in, and reenact the statutory portion as amended in furtherance of the work of the Code Revision Commission. This bill having been referred to the Committee on Code Revision, that committee recommends that this bill do pass.
Okay, before I recognize the author, I have to say, I think as I do most years, this is my favorite bill of the session. Thrilling, titillating, dramatic. It's just, I can't say enough good things about this, Chairman Hfrd. Chair recognizes Chairman Hfrd to present the bill.
Without a doubt, Mr. Speaker, the most exciting, thrilling legislation that we get to consider this year, the annual Code Revision Bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to present House Bill 1428. This includes omissions, corrections, different changes needed in the statute. You'll notice as you go through the bill, it tracks with the titles that are at issue, so it stays very organized for your review, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, I can't believe it, but you don't have any questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask the House's favorable consideration. I yield the well.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of House Bill 1428. The ayes are 149, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 911.
House Bill 911 by Ralston VII and others to make and provide appropriations for the state fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2022 and ending June 30th, 2023. This bill item referred to the Committee on Appropriations. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House, the chair resolves the House into a committee of the whole House for the purpose of considering House Bill 911, the General Appropriations Bill. The chair appoints the gentleman from the 159th District, the majority leader of this House, as chairman to preside over the committee of the whole House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from the 116th House District, Chairman England, to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. That was as bad as the good morning was this morning for the speaker. Good afternoon, everyone. That's a little better. That's a little better. Sounds like your lunch might be putting you to sleep, so if it does, that's all right, because I'm about to otherwise. So, well, we are here to take up House Bill 911, which will be the FY23 spending plan for our state. As always, and I would be remiss if I didn't, an awful lot of thank yous are needed here today. Thank you to our subcommittees and subcommittee chairs that have spent hours upon hours upon hours working on this budget you have before you this afternoon. Thank you to the Governor's Office and OPB for their work on sharing information and helping us understand what it was that they had done in their initial portions of the budget. But certainly not least is our House Budget and Research Office staff. And I like it that they're coming in a parade here now. But you all know and have seen these young folks scattered around this Capitol every day and the work that they continuously do throughout the year. And would it not be for them, we would not be able to have this budget laying on your desk that is grammatically and numerically correct, and just the hours that they spend on it. Martha and Christine are constantly running. All of the rest of the crew is constantly running, and that's exactly what they're doing right now, is running to get over here. You can see who the younger and faster ones are, I guess. Or maybe they were just closer in the building. But yes, I know. I'll pay for that later, I'm sure. The $30.2 billion budget that you see in front of you today represents a 10.8% increase over last year, and what a difference a year makes. I'm not going to take a whole lot of time here on the front end to talk about the economy or the usual contextual information that we share to introduce the budget, because I cannot wait to walk you through the end product of your work. You can look at the size of this document and tell that the members of the subcommittees worked as teams to construct a deliberate and thoughtful plan for funding the future, our state's future. As we walk through the budget, I have four key themes that I want you to remember. Trust funds. This is the premier budget reflecting the 9 dedicated revenue streams put into the new budget structure via House Bill 511 from last year. The Agricultural Trust Fund, the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund, the Fireworks Trust Fund, the Solid Waste Trust Fund, the State Children's Trust Fund, the Georgia Transit Trust Fund, the Transportation Trust Fund, and the Trauma Care Trust Fund, along with the Wildlife Endowment Trust Funds, are presented with transparent earnings and where they are statutorily required to be spent. Just look at the revenue cover page of your tracking document on page 37 in the governor's budget book to access that information easily and historically, but also for your reference today. Education. Education is always our #1 priority. K-12 appropriations sets an all-time record level of state funding at $11.8 billion. $11.8 billion. For the most important investment this state has. QBE is fully funded, and teachers and certificated personnel get the last installment of their promised $5,000 raises at a cost of $291.7 million, which together with nearly $20 million in an increase in pre-K teachers gives us an investment of over $300 million in this one item alone. In higher education, we addressed affordability and provided enhancements for scholarship amounts, as well as funding just under $230 million to the university's teaching formula as tuition to replace operating funds derived from student fees initiated over a decade ago. Salary increases. Nearly every single program in this budget, includes the first COLA, including a first COLA for state retirees in 14 years, puts forth an increase to address the literally hours of testimony regarding state workforce needs and the competition to retain its staff. The $5,000 COLA lifts the entire workforce and accounts for roughly $610 million. And in the House version is accompanied by an additional targeted increases where turnover is crippling our ability to perform the very core services that a state should provide. Our correctional officers in the Department of Juvenile Justice and Department of Corrections leave at a rate that sometimes reaches 90%. In that same vein, behavioral health staff at our state hospitals, nurses and aides, who care for those with mental health issues and criminal histories, have a collective turnover rate of just over 50%, which directly impedes the number of beds that we can provide to allow for treatment. We've asked public health nurses to be our front line in the COVID army, to go into homes and clinics to provide safety net care, but because the demand for nurses is so high, competition from private entities has spiked an irresistible opportunity for them to leave. And while the increases of these types of jobs have significant emotional appeal, there are areas of state government where the turnover affects our ability to operate at the uppermost level of efficiency. And the need to stem the turnover in these positions appeals to our sense of fiscal responsibility. For example, this body wanted transparency in spending, just as we noted a while ago with the trust funds, but we need our auditors to help guarantee that. The department is paying anywhere from 12 to 33% below other state and local governments. The House version deliberately targets market raises to higher turnover jobs, and we've added almost $28.7 million for correctional officers, $16.3 million for public health nurses, $20.2 million for behavioral health nurses and aides, and adjustments for state auditors, EPD engineers, death investigator specialists, and Metro Atlanta troopers, and more. The growing magnitude of this issue compelled us to request a market study, or salary market study, through the Human Resources Division of the Department of Administrative Services on line 12.5.2. Salaries as a recruitment and retention tool are fortified by enhancements to the state's benefit package. About $154 million to provide retirement and leave adjustments. In total, the House version of the FY23 budget uses a third of all new funding to reinvest in tax-paying Georgians who are our workforce. Major policy investments are included. Law enforcement. In addition to the salaries we discussed, this document embodies the criminal justice reform package that we've been working on and expands access and success of the accountability court model. On your desk under Chairman Hitchens' card, you have a summary, necessary and helpful because the comprehensive and visionary approach we are taking to strengthen these successful components across our entire law enforcement spectrum. Direct investments of over $65 million that will have indirect savings in investigation and evidence processing times, accurate evidence, officer training and counseling, and the list goes on. Our efforts to delineate the proper placement of persons involved in legal and correctional systems because of behavioral health issues is part of that vision, and having appropriate and quality placement and treatment options go hand in hand with lasting positive outcomes. So it brings me to behavioral health. As we emerge from the years of the U.S. Department of Justice oversight in building our infrastructure, the need continues to grow, and thankfully, the stigma is starting to shrink. Yes, we are stringing the pearls together for legally related interactions in behavioral health, but there's a high demand for all of us to have access to services. For some, it may be one time. For others, it may be a lifetime. The second summary on your desk, under Chair Lady Dempsey's card, is a roadmap of the new funding that in some instances blends with law enforcement, but is comprehensive and addressed in multiple agencies and totals nearly $100 million in the ongoing stabilization and striving to expand capacity for access for services to all Georgians. So if you will, take out your tracking document, and you'll find on your desk, as I mentioned just a second ago, the kind of briefs from Chairman Hitchens and from Chair Lady Dempsey. You'll also find a very helpful graphic as it relates to transportation funding. And I strongly recommend that, and actually it's one of the best ways I've seen to understand how our transportation funding formula works in the state. And you'll also find under my card a copy of the budget highlights. So I just want to make sure that you know that those things are already on your desks. So if you will, take out the tracking document, we'll run through it. So under the Georgia Senate, there are no changes. Under the Georgia House of Representatives, you'll see the annualization of the COLAs for our employees, also the 40 hours of earned annual leave to allow our employees to take that, and adjustments to the employee retirement system. So there'll be state changes that are common throughout the document. I will not note each one of those as I come to those. So under the joint offices of the General Assembly, you'll see one addition there at 3.1.6 for legislative operations, an increase in price there for our LexisNexis contract to allow accessibility for us to be able to look at code and for our constituents to be able to look at code. Under 3.1.7, just removing some one-time funds there. Moving on to audits and accounts, and I'll remind you again that under audits and accounts is actually a sort of a branch of the General Assembly. So we have to make all the changes there. The governor loads what they send to them, but otherwise any changes we load. Then moving on to 4.1.8, you'll see that one actually moves over in just a second to line 4.3.1. The reduction of some one-time funds at 4.1.9, and then just asking for ongoing work in utilizing existing funds at 4.1.10 for an audit of the spending of the ARP dollars across the state. 4.3.1, you'll see the item that was moved from earlier. Under the Court of Appeals, again, the statewide changes and things that we have to add or delete there because the governor and the governor's office OPB cannot. 5.1.4, you'll see an increase in funds for per diem adjustments. As our per diem increases with the General Assembly, their per diem is tied to ours, so we have to do an increase there. Eliminating funds for the one-time development of the case management system is a reduction there. And you'll look over at 5.2.6 and 5.2.7, true up at 5.2.6 in relation to the COLA, and on 5.2.7, just saying no to that additional judicial assistant. Under Judicial Council, Section 6, restoration at 6.4.1 of some operating funds that we'd had to reduce in previous years. Moving on then to Juvenile Courts, no changes there. Prosecuting attorneys, you'll see at 8.2.12, 13, and 14, funds for one additional assistant DA in the 3 circuits that are being created this year. At 8.2.10, you'll see 4 additional assistant DAs for the juvenile courts in the Bell Forsyth, Chattahoochee, Northern, and Petula judicial circuits. That's part of our House law enforcement package. I'll also note that at 8.2.6 and 8.2.7 are two additions there that are part of the LEO package as well. You'll see some eliminations of funds on things that were put in before they were aware that the $5,000 COLA was going out. So we've made those true-up adjustments there. 8.3.10, still under prosecuting attorneys. You'll see an adjustment for the payroll specialist position and then elimination of the funds for our prosecutor position that's not needed just at this time. Under Superior Courts, you'll see a few changes at 9.1.4, 9.2.5, and a couple of other places. Those are replaced because of the $5,000 COLA, so they were not necessary. At 9.3.16, you'll see where we're bringing the law clerks up to a $50,000 rate or pay rate, and the $5,000 COLA was already included prior, so it allowed for a reduction there of added funds. Under the Supreme Court, at 10.1.9, you'll see an adjustment there for the trooper that is assigned to the Superior Court to incorporate the $5,000 COLAs for them. And then you'll see a couple of other adjustments. And at 10.1.3, we're seeing just one position instead of two. Under State Accounting Office, most of the State Accounting Office and Department of Administrative Services, DOAS, are funded through state funds. So those are considered other funds, and so it makes it a little tricky when you do a COLA like we've done for all state employees. And so we're kind of having to back into the door just a little bit different than we do in other state agencies, because typically this would be spread throughout all agencies. And so what you'll see here in SAO is the spread within SAO instead of through all other agencies. Under the State Board of Accountancy at 11.6.4, you'll see the addition for one new auditor that is needed there. Section 12, again, under Department of Administrative Services. Under 12.2.2 are the two compensation resolutions that we passed out of our committee yesterday. And if those are actual final passage, then we will fund those when we get together for conference, or if the Senate passes the budget or passes them before they get to the budget, it may be added then. 12.3.2, you'll see an addition for the Georgia Aviation Authority to cover some travel. Then under Section 13, Department of Ag. Most of what you see here are true-ups. 13.1.3, you'll see an addition to do away with the austerity reduction at the Athens and Tifton Vet Labs. But you'll see also true-ups at 13.2.1, 13.2.7, 13.3.1. Moving on to 13.4.1 is also adjustments. At 13.5.1, you'll see an increase for maintenance cost at the Poultry Vet Diagnostic Lab. And then down at the Soil and Water Conservation Committee at 13.7.6 and 13.7.7, those two items kind of go together because it pertains to the Soil and Water Conservation Commission. But you'll see that we're adding additional funds for each of the conservation districts around the state, and then adding some regional managers and technical specialists. So any land disturbance activity of over 1 acre in size in the state of Georgia has to have an erosion and sediment control plan for it. And so the Georgia Soil and Water Conservation Commission and those local districts are in charge of making sure that those plans are submitted and approved. And so we need to make sure that they're able to do that job. Banking has no changes under Section 15, Department of Behavioral Health. A lot of work went in here. And as I mentioned in my opening comments about a lot of the things that we're doing for behavioral health, you're going to see a lot of those manifest themselves here within this budget. At 15.2.8, though, is one kind of outside of that realm as it deals with the now and comp waivers. We're adding an additional, to the governor's 100 proposed in his budget, we're adding an additional 225 slots and an additional administrative position to help manage those slots for those needed across the state. So we're very happy about that. Chair Lady Dempsey and her subcommittee were very passionate about making that happen as well. 15.2.10 deals with our developmental disability providers. Many of you heard from those folks early on about needing a rate increase. We'd passed an actual 5% rate increase for them last year. It had been tied up at CMS awaiting approval. We did find out day before yesterday that that original 5% has been approved, and so we're adding 1 additional percent there as well. 15.211, just telling the department to use some of the ARP money that they have for a rate study. At 15.2.12, a 5% increase for non-waiver family support. At 15.2.13, I mentioned the behavioral health nurses and aides. And so this is the first entry that you see where we're doing a substantial increase in pay for those individuals. And you'll see that several other times within this section of the budget, but I want to point it out to you there, and you'll see it in 3 or 4 other locations. Moving on down to 15.2.14, with the coming extension of the National Public Health Emergency, it allows us to capture some funds that we would normally have, state funds that we normally have in programs, because that's being extended for another 90 days. And so what we're doing in DBHDD is saying to use those dollars and plow those back into direct services to individuals through that language item. 15.3.5 is the addition of 15 forensic peer mentors, to help provide for transition and reentry to support services. 15.4.1 is just a true up. Then moving on to 15.4.10, we agree and completely and totally support the assisted outpatient treatment programs, but realize that those cannot be stood up on the first day. So what we've done here is just account for knowing that they're going to have to do a staggered implementation on those going forward. The housing voucher program at 15.4.12, you'll see an increase to about 500 total housing vouchers, and then a program manager at the line just below that. And then you'll see at 15.4.14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 are all increases related to either the behavioral health plan or the law enforcement package here in the House. 15.4.21 deals with the Georgia Crisis and Access Line that goes live on July the 16th, making sure that it's fully stood up and operational. 22 are the nurses. 23 is a new 18-bed medical psychiatric unit with our partner Grady Memorial Hospital. Then the behavioral health rate study that I mentioned a while ago is at 15.4.24, and then recognition of the extension of the public health emergency at 15.4.25. Moving on to child and adolescent developmental disabilities, at 15.6.4, you'll see an addition to a very special partner that we have in the state called Extra Special People, or ESP, to expand their services to more communities in our state. The additional help for our nurses and health aides. And then 15.6.6 is another partner that we have in the Savannah area, the Matthew Reardon Center for Autism, that provides services outside of the metro area, especially in that southeast Georgia corner. At 15.8.4, you'll see an addition of a little over $5.6 million for the Georgia Apex program. We're continuing to grow that program and get these services into every school building in the state. At 15.9.6 and 15.9.7, many of you have heard, I know, from your special attorney generals, assistant attorney generals, dealing with DFACs and other areas of the state's budget, and as well as the paralegals that help them, needing an increase in pay in order to be able to get folks to do that work. So you'll see the first entry here. You'll see additional entries when we get over to human services in a little bit, where it goes into DFACs and elder services, to take that rate to $77.50 an hour and for the lawyers, and $40 an hour for the paralegals. And then 15.9.8, just putting the infrastructure in place to handle the national opioid settlement. Going on over 15.10.6, you'll see a slight reduction on the capital maintenance. We funded $2 million of that in the amended budget, so we've just reduced $2 million here. So it'll be still a total of $5 million that they will have for that help. 15.10.7, again, those nurses and aides that I'd mentioned earlier. Under the Department of Community Affairs, Section 16, back toward the back of it, you'll see a reduction of one-time funds at 16.10.6 as it relates to a food bank program. With the rollout of the Georgia Grown Food Bank Initiative in the Department of Ag, this funding was no longer necessary, so we're shifting over to it. Under the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority, you'll see an addition there for the Resource Conservation and Development Councils, the RC&Ds across the state, and then also the Georgia Rural Water Association at 1612-2 as it relates to the emergency response that they help provide under natural disasters here in the state as well. And then at Greta, you'll see a true up on the $5,000 COLA. Under the Department of Community Health, Chairman Parrish and his team have done an incredible job here, and you'll see many of the behavioral health pieces throughout this portion of the document as well. But if you look first at 1717 and 18, those deal with two of the enterprise systems that they are standing up to modernize the record keeping as it relates to Medicaid in the state of Georgia. 1719 is part of the behavioral health package, and it's a study on the reimbursement rates for mental health providers. And then at 17110, a language item, again establishing the tracking and analysis that is necessary to track the pay parity issues dealing with insurance. Moving on under to healthcare access and improvement, you'll see a reduction at 1745, but an add back at 1746. Just doing this to keep the record keeping straight. A reduction of $500,000, but an addition of $500,000 for federally qualified health centers. This would add two of those, one in the coastal FQHC that will serve McIntosh and Glenn counties, and then South Central that will service Irwin, Ben Hill, Coffee, Berrien, Atkinson, Cook, and Lowndes counties. These will be concentrating on behavioral health as well. Then at 1747, some additional help for our AHECs across the state that provide much needed training, and then an expansion of the RN reentry program at 1748. Moving on down to Hfrd, healthcare regulation, facility regulation at 1754, just a reduction in funds there to meet what their expected or projected expenditures will be. Under age, blind, and disabled Medicaid, you'll see a truing up of some numbers there. At 1771 and 72, the recognition of the extension of the public health emergency. Just a correction on the RS means cost report at 1776. Then down at 17710, you'll see a rate increase for our LTAC, long-term acute care hospitals, and inpatient rehab facilities, our IRFs, across the state. We have 11 LTACs and 5 IRFs across the state that treat a very high acuity patient, and so they were needing some help with increased cost as well. 17711, just taking the nursing home cost report to the 2020 cost report, which is the latest audited report there. 17712, a 5% rate increase for mechanical ventilators. One of those items that's very specialized, but it's not covered under the cost report. Then moving on down to 17713, you'll see a rate increase there for home and community-based services. You'll see another increase at 17714 that deals with reimbursement rates for medical nutrition therapy. And you'll see a couple of other ads related to that at 17815 and 17995. And then at 177, excuse me, I'm sorry, I told you wrong on those two references. On 17715, that you'll also see that at 815 and 95, as it deals with a 10% rate increase for 2 dental extraction codes and a 7% increase for 17 other dental restorative codes. 1781, you'll see a reduction there based on the public health emergency extension, and at 1782. Something I do want to mention, and that Chairman Parrish had pointed out in his subcommittee meeting, is at 1786, you'll see it's not a change, but I just want to recognize something the governor has done here in his original budget, and that's to eliminate the attestation period for providers on all 108 procedure codes. And what that is when a new doctor goes in to start practicing, there is a time period that it takes for them to attestate, and during that time, they do not get paid by Medicaid. And what we're doing is backing up and saying from day one, they will be reimbursed and the facilities will be reimbursed going forward. 1783, just adding there to include HIV patients within the benefits of Medicaid. Again, 17.814, the medical nutrition therapy. 17.815, the dental codes. And then another one at 17.816, another 1115 waiver to remove the 5-year waiting period for lawful permanent residents to be covered under our state Medicaid program. 17.817, an adjustment and an increase in OBGYN codes. And then 17.818 is starting us down the path of going to value-based purchasing for our providers. It's a quality driver and offers incentives to increase quality in their treatment across the state. 17.94, again, the medical nutrition therapy. 9.5, the dental piece. 9.6, once again, relates to the value-based purchasing. On down at 17.11.4, you'll see the implementation of behavioral health care workforce database at $400,000 there. Under workforce at 17.12.2, you'll see where we've increased the new residency slots now to 199 slots from the first proposed 136 slots. 17.12.3, you'll see that moved actually over into public health here in just a few minutes. New residency program to help Archibald Medical Center, stand that up at 17.12.4. You'll see provision for additional fellowship positions at Augusta University in gynecology, oncology, public health focused medicine, and rural primary care at 17.25. And then at 17.12.6, just doing a statewide assessment on the dental workforce. We're finding an issue as it relates to Medicaid and finding enough providers across the state that do dental health care that will take Medicaid. So we're just trying to find out who will and who won't, and if there's somebody we can talk to get more to take those patients on. 17.12.7 and 12.8, you'll see us telling them to utilize existing funds and then providing a bump there for those residency programs that we've established. 17.12.9, the capitation funds, increasing those for 7 residency slots at Emory. And then under Mercer, you'll see funds there at 17.13.2, and just saying to repurpose some funds that are already there for an accelerated track program, including the forensic pathology piece that we'll talk about more here in just a few minutes. Under Morehouse at 17.4.1, you'll see a $2 million ad there to help them get started on setting up their new nursing program, which will be a 15-month highly intensive program to put more nurses in the pipeline. And then an addition at 14.2 to help support their child and adolescent psychology and psychiatric residency programs. Under physicians for rural areas at 17.15.1, you'll see an addition of funds for the loan repayment program. This will cover 7 physicians, 1 PA, and 20 more APRNs. 17.6.1, another partner we have in medical education, of course, has been the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, or PCOM. They expanded to Moultrie a few years ago, and that program continues to do very well, and so we're trying to do our part to kind of hold up our end of the deal by helping them with the expansion cost as they add more students to their programs. Under drugs and narcotics at 17.18.4, you'll see funds for a data management system, and then 2 additional agents or investigators at 18.5. Department of Community Supervision, there are no changes. Department of Corrections. So in the amended budget, you'll recall that as we talked about it on Wednesday, we've done an additional $2,000. The Senate had brought to us a package to look at the high turnover rates. And so we've done an additional $2,000 to the base pay for our correctional officers. And so you'll see that entered here already into the 23 budget, and that will be on top of the $5,000 COLA that they'll be receiving. But you'll see that at 19.2.7, 3.7, 4.6, and you'll also see that at 19.8.10. Backing up to 19.7.1, you'll see an increase there for the per diem rates to expressly provide for a salary adjustment for the correctional officers only within our partners at the private prisons. Now, I know that there's some angst about this issue, and including myself, but however, we need to remember, number one, this is a contract with the state to provide a service to to help us house those individuals that need to be housed. Number two, this will go to the corrections officers only. Let me give you an idea of where these corrections officers live. And it will help you understand that in many of these cities, these facilities are the largest employer in these facilities. Folkestone, Alamo, Nichols, and Millen. And this will be handled through an amendment to the contract so we can make sure that those funds are going to those officers, to those families, to those people that are living and working in those communities and spending money in those communities as well. And at 19.8.9, you'll see an adjustment there as it relates to the transportation hubs. It's a revised plan from the Department of Corrections that we're addressing there, and then the additional salary increase at 19.9.6. Under the Department of Defense, there are no changes. Under the Department of Driver Services, you'll see at 21.2.6 a reduction in the reduction of to help complete the construction of a testing pad and carousel at one of their facilities in southeast Georgia. And then down at 21.2.8, just the removal of one-time funds there as it relates to an ID program that they were doing. Under decal, you'll also see those statewide changes that I'd mentioned earlier as it relates to the $5,000 COLA. Under economic development, section 23, if you'll go on down to 23.9.5, and here in economic development is where we're able to nurture a lot of the partnerships that we have around the state. And at under tourism at 23.9.5, the National Infantry Museum down at Columbus. They're looking to do some refurbishments, but also some expansions of those things that they do so very well. If you've not been there, I highly recommend a visit to the National Infantry Museum. It is one of those things that will stay with you for the rest of your life. But adding to those exhibits and allowing them to further attract folks in so that all of us can pay the proper respect to those that have served for us. 23.9.6, you'll see an addition for security expenses associated with our bid for the FIFA World Cup. And then at 23.9.7, our friends and partners at the MLK Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change, we've partnered with them now for several years and just helping them with some one-time expenses for improvements based on the number of people that they have come through there. They have about 1 million visitors a year through there. It's quite impressive. Under education, section 24, under ag education, you'll see some adjustments there. Ag education in the state of Georgia is going through an incredible growth phase. There have been some incredible leaders and friends of mine that have been there over the last 15 or 20 years that have done some incredible things to help educate young people not only how to grow their food, but where their food and fiber comes from. And so we're doing some additions there that you'll see to help go forward and help fund those programs. And also at 24.18, I'll just highlight one of those. There'll be 21 new extended day, extended year programs, which is where the teachers actually go with the students after the school day and help them with their projects. 24.3.7 under central office, you'll see an addition there for our friends at the American Association of Adaptive Sports. Then an elimination at 24.3.8 of some one-time funding. A true up and adjustment for House Bill 403 from the 2017 session at 24.4.7. You'll see a true up in the number at 24.8.6 under GNETs for actuals. At 24.11.5, Chairman Jones and his subcommittee and Sarah and several folks on our staff have been working with the residential treatment facility friends, trying to get them a funding formula that works for them. As I explained yesterday, we count QB numbers twice a year. Well, at an RTF on the count day, there might be only 4 or 5 students there, but the very next day there may be 25 more show up. Well, they're only going to get counted or paid for the 5 that were there on that day. So what we're trying to do is give them more predictability and allow them to be ready to receive those students when they need to receive those students. And so my hat's off to Chairman Jones, because I know that was not an easy task at all. 24.11H, you'll see an increase for feminine hygiene going into the 5th grade there. And then you'll see a reduction in funds for the closure of one of the residential treatment facilities at 2411.9. Under school nutrition, you'll see a couple of additions there. One of those is a 5.4% salary increase for those professionals, along with an increase for the school nutrition funding program there. Under preschool disabilities, you'll see a couple of true-ups there at 2413.2 and 13.3, true-up again at 2414.1, true-up again at 2415.1, and then another true-up as it relates to local 5-meal share at 2416.1. Under QBE, you'll see several other formula true-ups as it goes through there based on either changes we've made in legislation or changes in student counts since OPB originally had the budget. But one thing I want to point out to you there at 2417.9 and at, let me find it, 2417.3, you'll see a move of some funds from the school nurse program out of the QBE program. It was put there, it's not part of the QBE formula, but it was put there originally years ago, and I'll show you where those come back up in just a second. Then at the RESAs at 2418, you'll see increasements in funds there based on enrollment growth, replacement of austerity reductions, mental health contractual services, and then a 5.4% increase for their employees that are non-certificated. So moving on to new section 24.20, you'll see there where we're putting the school nurse program as a standalone program in the budget. And we're doing that for transparency, so everybody always knows where it's at, so we can all see it. And you'll see it 24.20.3, of course, the 5.4% increase for those nurses as well. Again, just like public health nurses, those school nurses have been on the front line of this COVID battle now for the last 2 years, coming up almost exactly 2 years, I guess. Under technology and career education, you'll see an adjustment at 24.23.7 as it relates to the extended day, extended year program for those technology and career education employees. Under ERS, and I know that we've all gotten many emails from our retired employees in our state, and we're thankful that throughout this budget you will see, it's kind of hard to see, but it's in there, where the adjustment is being made to get them to the position of being able to do a COLA for the first time in 14 years. And so you'll see kind of a note about that, a language item at 25.4.2, recognizing the $118 million that is spread across the entire budget. At 25.3.2, you'll see where we've raised the PSERS retirement system from a $15.75 per year of service up to $16 per year of service. So that's your bus drivers and those folks that don't fall under any of the other retirement plans. That is their retirement plan. Under the State Forestry Commission, you have several things here that are all sort of tied together. There was an audit done of how they function a couple of years ago, and it identified several opportunities for efficiencies and areas of savings. So what we're doing is putting a person in there to manage kind of the P's and Q's on a lot of these areas, but also you'll see at 26.1.7, 2.6, and at 3.7, part of an employee development and retention plan that they've been working on now for several years. 26.3.6, just the replacement of where they were using some federal funds when we got into the tight in FY21 and had to make reductions. They shifted some people over to federal funds, and so we're shifting them back to state funds now where they should be. Section 27, Offices of the Governor. Under the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget, Section 27, you'll just see where we're pulling out the Office of Health and Strategy and Coordination and putting it into its own separate program. You'll see that move at 27.3.7, and then you'll see it re-enter at 27.4.2. Also, language item at 4.3, dealing with all payer claims database, and then recognizing the one analyst that's going to be needed for the collection and reporting of nursing and hospital data. And then moving on to 27.4.5 is actually just a language item in dealing with aggregating and consolidating all of that hospital data as well. Under GEMA at 27.6.5, you'll see an increase in funds for their career retention plan as part of the law enforcement package of this body. Moving on to the Governor's Office of Student Achievement, you'll see a couple of reductions there, but again, just in the name of transparency and allowing everybody to be able to see things better, we've broken out the Governor's Honors Program and the Governor's School Leadership Academy into their own two separate programs at 27.9 and 27.10. Under the Office of the Child Advocate at 27.11.4, you'll see the addition of 2 investigative positions there to expand or to investigate any of those things dealing or related to children. Under Human Services, under After School Care, just the recognition of being able to use some federal funds and pull back some of the state funds under that program at 28.36. You see an addition there for services to at-risk girls. Many of you in Middle Georgia in the Macon area are very familiar with the PACE Center and what they're doing with many of these young females, and we're looking to make sure that that's something that we can replicate across the state. Under Child Support Services, you'll see the first entry there at 28.4.6 and 4.7 as it relates to the SAGs on child support services and also the paralegals under that program as well, taking them to the $77.50 rate for the attorneys and $40 an hour for the paralegals. Moving on under Child Welfare Services, an add there to our CASAs, our court-appointed special advocates, very active in our communities. They're kind of the backbone in many ways as it comes to child welfare services as they engage into the court system. And so what this will do will allow them to expand their capacity to be in every county in the state now. I'm very happy about that. 28.5, 10, and 11, again, the SAGs and the paralegals. At 28.7.7, you'll see a move right there down into the elder and community living services. I'll talk about that just in a second. SAGs again at 28.8.6 and 28.8.7. Moving on to 28.9.5 and 28.9.6. I noted just a second ago a move out of the administration into this program as it relates to Alzheimer's. Thank you to all of you that are here wearing purple today. Most of y'all know that that's kind of my tradition when I present the budget. Then I wear purple in honor of my mother. This year's a little stronger because it's in honor of my mother-in-law too. We lost her back in January to Alzheimer's. And so folks talk a lot of times about legacies and what you're going to leave behind. And if there's anything that I hope is my legacy is what we've done to expand services for Alzheimer's patients across this state. So within Elder and Community Living Services, you'll see an addition there at 28.9.5 for the Dementia Care Specialist Program. They'll work with all the AAAs across our state, our area councils on aging. It's 28.9.6. You'll see the Georgia Memory Net program and the addition of an additional hub to be located out into the state so that these families and these patients have services closer to them than having to drive from South Georgia to Atlanta to see the top-of-the-line folks at Emory. Emory has been an incredible, incredible, incredible partner with us in this program. We've established sites across this state. We'll be establishing more sites across this state, and the addition of $3 million there helps us stand up one more site. It also helps us expand the telemedicine capabilities within that program. At 28.9.7, you'll see more funds for the non-Medicaid home and community-based services, an addition there. And then at 28.12.4, another one of those things that has been a priority of this House is dealing with our foster children. And what you'll see there is an addition to the clothing allowance for these children of $275 in addition to what they already get for these families. They're hosting these children in their homes and trying to make sure that they're clothed and adequately clothed to go to school and participate in activities across the state. Under Family Connection at 28.18.1, Our friends at Family Connection, again, another one of those entities that's in every one of our communities across the state. We're restoring the cut from FY21, but also making a slight addition there for a program that they're going to be rolling out as it relates to mental health as well. Remaining on in community services, moving on down to the Vocational Rehabilitation Agency at 2823.7. There was some cash put in for some maintenance and repairs that they need on some of their facilities. However, we have found that they have about $9.5 million in outstanding or existing bond balances that they can spend for those improvements. You'll see some additions then for independent living services, for the Commission on Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and then at 2823.10, an addition to allow them to open back up those priority service categories that they had to close down as we came up short on cash a couple of years ago during the dip with COVID. And then a restoration of funds for the Georgia Radio Reading Service at 2823.11. Moving on to the Office of the Insurance Commissioner, you'll see at 29.4.7, just the recognition of the fees that they collect within that office. Those fees are used for investigative services in many different ways, whether it be elevators or hazardous materials, compliance with manufactured housing, carnival rides. They have to do all of those inspections, so what we're doing is allowing them to keep the vast majority, about $3.8 million in those fees, and then pulling back about $383,000 in state funds that are above what they're needing for those positions. And then at 29.4.8, part of the behavioral health package is the inspector that they will need to have in place as it relates to mental health parity with the insurance companies. Under GBI, at 30.1.6, throughout GBI we'll be adding an additional 67 positions in the crime labs, medical examiner's office, investigative divisions, and all of that. And so they're needing some additional help as it relates to human resources with the increased workload that those individuals will bring with them. At 30.1.7, you'll see an add there of $1.1 million for capital maintenance and repairs at their headquarters. Then moving over to 30.3.6, you'll see 6 additional positions on top of what the governor had already recommended for those medical examiner offices to address their workload. And then at the death investigator specialist, you'll see an addition there that we've added at 30.3.8, and trying to put some parity in there as it relates to 25 of their employees, and then increasing about 207 crime lab scientists. 30.3.9, again, part of the law enforcement package as it relates to trying to get through the backlog of chemistry and firearm cases. Then moving down to 30.4.7, just annualizing 4 positions we had added in the amended budget for elections investigations. And then dealing with the gang task force, adding 15 additional special agents and 6 criminal investigators and 1 help desk analyst there, and again, part of the law enforcement package. 30.5.7, you'll see the local first responder grants to help local communities be able to equip their law enforcement personnel. Then under the CJCC, the accountability courts, you'll see some additions there. Most of those additions all deal with the law enforcement package, but your first one at 30.6.6 also deals with the mental health package as it addresses the expansion of the mental health accountability courts and court managers. But you'll also see that those other items tie directly to things related to either things that law enforcement run into or our mental health professionals run into. Under juvenile justice, section 31, you'll see throughout it also an additional $2,000 on top of the $5,000 COLA for those JCOs. Again, in testimony from the commissioner, we found that they have a 90% turnover rate within those COs. He came to see me the other day and he was happy. He was talking about the great improvement they had made on their retention. And I said, well, you're at 90%. He said, yeah, but we were at 97%. And I said, I got you. I understand completely. At 31.3.9 and also at 31.411, You'll see a reduction in funds there. Those two items were funded in the amended budget with cash, but you'll also see the $2,000 adjustment for those individuals as well. Moving into the Department of Labor, the labor budget is a little smaller than what it had been, and it's because of really one move that's being made as it relates to the Workforce Investment Act and moving that under the Department of Technical and, under TCSG, Technical College System of Georgia, so that we can better align those delivery of services to the end users, but also better align those services to the needs of employers. These individuals, it's envisioned, will be co-located in the Department of Labor offices across the state as employees of the TCSG system. But when those individuals come in and find that they're lacking one certificate or a little bit of training here or there to be able to apply for either this job at $14 an hour or this job at $23 an hour, all they need to do is one more certification or one more little bit of education. It will allow them to be instantly plugged into the technical college system to get that additional certification. You'll see a slight reduction at 32.2.1 dealing with the Chief Labor Officer bill being vetoed last year. And then you'll see also throughout the Department of Labor the understanding that until they get to October 1st, those employees on the $5,000 COLA do need to be covered with state funds until they can renegotiate those federal contracts, because the vast majority of their people are funded with federal funds. Under the Department of Law, you'll see an addition there of 3 more positions in the Human Trafficking Division, bringing that to 6 total. Moving on down under Natural Resources, Section 34. 34.2.6, those funds come out here, but they do go back in under Parks and Recreation. I'll show you that item in just a second. 34.2.7, just recognizing as a language item those SAGs that we'd mentioned earlier that they sometimes use for enforcement of boating under the influence laws in the state. Moving on under Environmental Protection, you'll see at 34.3.6, another small group of individuals that we had to make sure could get to the new federal fiscal year with a $5,000 COLA. Then at 34.3.7, you'll see an adjustment there. Again, a parity issue, but a retention issue, a huge retention issue in EPD as it relates to environmental compliance specialists and their engineers, trying to get them up to a market salary there. 34.6.5, you'll see the addition of 22 game wardens that we had to eliminate in the 21 budget due to cuts. But at 34.6.6, you'll see the recognition of the inflating gasoline prices right now that are projected to go into November. And so what we're doing there is putting $750,000 to buy gasoline and diesel fuel for those so they can stay in the road. You'll see a similar addition under the Department of Public Safety for our State Patrol here in a little bit as well. 34.7.6, we had a bill just a little bit earlier Representative Lim had as it related to the Council of American Indian Concerns, some additional funding for their activities as well as the per diem that are paid to their volunteer members there. 34.7.7 is the $10.55 million coming back in as it relates to facility improvements there and the expansion of use of these facilities across the state during the COVID pandemic. And again, folks started coming because of COVID, but they've continued to come because they realize what a hidden gem these parks are. 34.7.8, the Sound Short Line is our only state rolling state park. As the railroad that runs down there, they took a heavy hit during the pandemic when they had to shut down, so we're trying to alleviate some of the issues that they're having and make sure that they can maintain a safe operation. Under pardons and paroles, no changes. Under Section 36, State Properties Commission, you'll see just one little change there. The 2 Peachtree migration plan, we funded that in the amended budget, so it's not necessary to fund it in the big budget. Under public defenders, another bill that Chairman Gunner had just a little bit ago deals with the public defenders and getting them on some parity with the assistant public defenders and the assistant district attorneys. But you'll see at 37.2.6, 7, and 8, just annualization there of the new judgeships that were created at 37.2.9, 10, and 11. the funds added in for the 3 new judgeships we have created this year. And then juvenile assistant public defenders at 37.2.12, and then at 2.13 and 14 deal with the parity issue as well. 37.2.15, you'll see an ad there for 3 new conflict offices, and this is part of what we've heard from law enforcement around the state, and it's also included as part of the law enforcement package that this House and this General Assembly are working on this year. Moving on to Section 38, Department of Public Health. You'll see the transfer from DCH I mentioned earlier at 38.1.5, and then at 38.1.6, the expansion to help support the expansion of services for the Sickle Cell Foundation for the testing and the work that they do across our state. I mentioned the public health nurses in my opening comments as well. At 38.3.7, you'll see the first entry of the increase in helping our frontline COVID Army as it relates to the public health nurses at 38.3.7, 38.4.7, 38.5.4, and then we'll see it again in just a minute in grants to county offices. Do want to back up though and mention at 38.4.6, as it relates to McIntosh County, the ambulance provider that they had there is pulling out. It had been a contract provider. Their citizens will be left without ambulance coverage, and so we're trying to get them stood back up and operating. 38.10.4, something that Chair Lady Dempsey's been working on, of course, is dealing with lead testing for our young children. And so you'll see here the addition for the funds for the lead inspectors and the testing machines to support House Bill 1355. 38.10.5, again, dealing with the public health nurses. And then 38.11.5 as it relates to those nurses directly located in the counties to deal with the recruitment and retention needs there. 38.11.6 just allowing some input for grants for improved infrastructure and support in those counties as well. Department of Public Safety, Section 39, Capitol Police Services, 39.2.1 and 2.2. You'll see the $5,000 COLA and an additional $1,000 salary supplement for those individuals because they're used here within the 285 to help combat crime as well. 39.4.7 is to annualize the 10% salary supplement to Troop C that does patrol within 285. And then at 39.4.8, you'll see the addition of 10 additional SWAT unit troopers and 10 additional Nighthawk DUI troopers. Something that I didn't realize until Chairman Hitchens said it the other day, but State Patrol covers 105 counties in the state with SWAT. I just assumed that every county or every city had some type of cooperative agreement internally within the county to cover SWAT, but there are 105 counties that the Georgia State Patrol and their SWAT unit provides that coverage for those. 39.4.9, again, the recognition of increasing fuel prices there. 39.5.7 deals with the 10% salary supplement under the Motor Carrier Compliance Division. And then under the Public Safety Officer Support Program at 39.6.7, another piece of the law enforcement package, adding 2 peer counselors and 1 social worker to that program to help these officers that suffer from PTSD or have had a bad event that they need some help with. Under the Firefighter Standards and Training Council at 39.7.6 and 7.7, dealing with their testing database and the IT support for their program. Under the Public Safety Training Center at 39.9.8, you'll see a reduction in funds there. That was actually funded in the amended budget as well. Moving on to the Public Service Commission at Section 40, you'll see the annualization of costs for the e-filing system at 40.1.7, and then under Utilities Regulation at 40.3.4, you'll see the 8 new positions needed there with a lot of the projects that they have going on across the state. Section 41, University System. If you'll move over first at 41.4.4 under the Enterprise Innovation Institute, or EI squared, you'll see additional fundings for some match money under the ATDC to help with startups and leverage private funding there. It's about a 1-to-1 match or a 4-to-1 match. It's a considerable match that's added there. Removing some one-time funds at 41.8.4 for a program that dealing with cyber training and rural coding that did not get stood up. We'll keep evaluating that going forward. Under GTRI, the Georgia Tech Research Institute at 41.10.6, helping them as they look to stand up STEM programs around the state, primarily in rural counties. That science, technology, and engineering and mathematics programs, we all know that many of the small school systems do not have the resources they need to expand on that, and so GTRI has been kind enough to offer that up as something that they would be glad to help with. Moving on to 41.13.2 under the medical college. Augusta University, our state's medical school there. We'd added funds last year for a one-time foundation grant, but they're continuing to expand their 3+ program, which gets medical students in and out of their residency in 3 years. And so what we've done there is said no to the cut, added an additional $4.8 million to bring that total to $10 million in recognition of the growth of that program. Under public libraries at 41.14.7, you'll see an increase in the per capita grant from 40 cents to 50 cents per capita, or an increase of 10 cents there. Moving on to 41.15.4, you'll see that as a move from the teaching program at 41.18.15, saying yes, we support the program. It actually belongs here in this program under special funding initiatives instead of under the teaching program. Also under special funding initiatives, you'll find program that Chairman Knight has been working on now for about 2 years, maybe 3 years actually, I guess, as it relates to aviation career pathways. Middle Georgia State University has done an incredible job in the program that they have between Macon and Eastman in growing that program. And so what we're doing here and in the bond package is recognition of that and that expansion of those programs to get more of those individuals through the program and into the pipeline, earning very good salaries going forward. At 41.18.1, you'll see a slight adjustment there. It's just a true up. 41.18.3, again, just a true up. Now, when we get to 41.18.8, you'll see that we have said yes in language, but no on funding. This program and a couple of other programs I'll point out here in just a minute are actually A-unit programs. In the university system, there's an A-unit budget and a B-unit budget. The special funding initiatives, the land grant mission at the University of Georgia and at Fort Valley State fall under the B-unit. But under the A-unit are the typical instruction programs, and so those actually reside in the A-unit that the Board of Regents actually approves and says, yes, we will stand up this program. We've never funded these type programs in the teaching formula here, and so what we're seeing is, yes, we're fine with you going on and doing that, but we'll fund it when the time comes in the correct place in the future. Moving on at 41.18.10, again, a merit-based scholarship program, again, not the place that this belongs. We're not saying we don't agree with it. We're just saying that it is not to be created in this particular spot. 41.18.3 and 18.14, again, a couple of items that relate back to that A-unit issue that I mentioned a minute ago. 41.18.15 is the one that got moved back into SFI. And at 41.18.7, University of Georgia Small Business Development Center, SBDC, they're continuing to work with more and more nationalities of folks that are coming through the program. So they were needing some help with some additional multilingual professionals to help them service those individuals that they service. And then under Georgia Military College at 41.23, you'll see some adjustments that are formula true-ups for actual counts there. Department of Revenue, Section 42, no changes. Moving on to Section 43 is Secretary of State. You'll see one recognition of other funds there for the fees that they collect, where they've added some additional personnel, and we're just saying recognize those funds here at that particular place. At 43.5.8, another language item as it relates to the Board of Nursing on collecting the data that we'd mentioned back under the Governor's Office of Health Strategy and Coordination earlier. Moving on to student finance in section 44. You'll see at 44.1.8 in the commission administration, you'll see the addition of some personnel to help administer some of the new programs that we've added. So throughout the law enforcement package and the behavioral health package, you'll see several things that we have added. And we've not only added them in this budget, but we've added them over the last several budgets, especially under the Service Constable Loan Program. So it takes people to administer these programs, and we've been remiss in not funding those in the past. At 44.2.1, you'll see a true up there as it relates to dual enrollment. Under the engineering scholarship at 44.3.1, another true up. Under Hope GED at 44.6.1, a change in the methodology on the payment as it relates to the GED test. We've been funding that upon a $500 grant per participant at the completion of the program. What we're doing here is actually going to pay for the test on the front end. That's the big expense that they have to come up with. So that's allowed for us to capture a little bit of a savings there. Under Hope Scholarships private schools, you'll see an increase of 6% there. And then under public schools, you'll see a true up at 44.9.1 there. Under Service Constable loans, I'd mentioned that a little bit ago, and you'll see a ad there at 44.15.1 as it relates to the law enforcement package and GBI related to the full-time examiner, medical examiner positions, trying to increase that package to be able to attract those individuals. The National Guard Scholarship, a true up in the formula at 15.2. And then part of the law enforcement package on Service Constable loans for local and state law enforcement officers to be able to pursue degrees in criminal justice or other relevant social science fields for $1.4 million. At 44.15.4, you'll see just the recognition of the $10 million that we'd put in the amended budget for the behavioral health professions student counselable loan program there. Under TEGs, or tuition equalization grants, at 44.16.1, you'll see a bump there from $850 to $900 for those students. Under teachers' retirement, there's no changes. Under the technical college system, you'll see a few changes there. If you'll look at 46.4.1, you'll see a reduction we made there for a program that's not up and running just yet. We'll continue to monitor that and do what we need to do should it get up and running. At 46.6.10, the Dual Achievement Program pilot, an adjustment or true up on what the actuals have been in that program. At 46.611, a recognition of the high-cost instructional programs that TCSG does, from truck driving to welding, several other high-cost programs that the tuition is just not enough to cover. What we're doing is saying we're going to come in and help cover that. At 46.612, again, part of what Chairman Knight has been working on for several years as it relates to aviation programs. These will be those folks that work on airplanes and make sure that the airplanes are running and operating the way they're supposed to. And so just kind of bolstering those programs at several institutions across the state. Now, when I get to transportation, I told you yesterday in the full committee, I've got a cheat sheet that Chairman Perkle has provided for the mind spaghetti that the transportation funding formula is. I'm going to read it off because I can't explain it any better than what it reads right here on this piece of paper. So I'll start with program additions to the GDOT budget include an investment of $10 million to airport aid at 47.1.2. We've restored $1 million, and at 47.1.5, we've increased funding by $9 million. So it's $10 million total. We've also added $10 million to state-owned rail lines at 47.12.12. In the balance of the transportation budget, we ensured dedicated fees were used for the purpose for which they were intended. Transportation trust funds, including the hotel motel tax, EV, and heavy vehicle, are used to fund the ATL, GRETA, CERTA, debt service, and transit. To accommodate the source and use of funds directive, we also utilized fund swaps throughout the transportation budget. Trust fund dollars were replaced with state general funds at 47.1.3 47.10.6 and 12.8 and put into debt service. Similarly, trust fund dollars were replaced with motor fuels at 47.3.2. The bulk of this swap is found in the increase of $14 million in capital construction at 47.2.1, and the balance in the recruitment and retention adjustments at 47.4.2, 5.2, 9.2, 11.2, 13.2, 14.2. Trust fund dollars were replaced with state general funds at the adjustment to recruitment and retention in ports and waterway at 47.10.8 and in rail at 47.12.11, while adjustment to retention and transit at 47.15.10 utilizes both trust funds. While we're looking at the transit program, we did another fund swap, but for a different reason. House Bill 511 provided a cap of 10% of the transportation trust funds would be used for transit. The number was $1.2 million over the cap, and so that adjustment is reflected at 47.15.7 and 15.8. You'll see additional true-ups at 47.6.3 and 6.4 to accurately reflect the base budget for the newly established programs, as shown in rail at 47.12.5 and transit at 15.5. 47.6.1 and 13.1s are true-ups to reflect positions left out of the $5,000 COLA. So there you have that. Again, I refer you back to the sheet that our analyst Abby Day created, the little bubble graph that's on your desk for probably the best explanation I've ever seen of how transportation dollars are used in the state of Georgia. Moving on to Department of Veterans Services, Section 48. You'll see at 48.2.4 just the recognition that there remains $1 million in the base for the new Veterans Cemetery at Augusta, a new groundskeeper position at the cemetery at Glenville, and a name change or name correction from Veterans Cemetery to Veterans Cemeteries at 48.2.6. And then 48.4.6 is the addition of a suicide prevention and outreach person to specialize in veterans' mental health issues. Section 49, Workers' Compensation Board, there are no changes there, and of course, all of you have already flipped to Section 50 as it relates to bonds, so I won't go over those. Mr. Chairman, if you're still awake back there, and I wouldn't blame you if you fell asleep during that, but if you're still awake back there, that concludes the walkthrough of the tracking sheet, and I'll be glad to attempt to answer any questions that folks may have. I'll take a few. I know everybody's wanting to get home in front of this weather that's moving in later this afternoon, so I won't take but just a few.
Mr. Chairman, that may have been one of your finest efforts. I can assure you that. I've heard several of them.
Thank y'all.
Mr. Chairman, that was kind of a joke, but it turned out not to be.
It turned out pretty good, didn't it?
Mr. Chairman, I want to make two observations. I don't think, in fact, I know, there's not been a penny in that budget since you've been chairman of this committee that you did not know where it came from and where it went to and how it was spent. So
that's
as
my
a
job.
steward of the as a steward of the people's money of this state, I thank you. The other thing that really was riveting to me as you were speaking. Riveting. No, this really was now, y'all. Several of y'all were dozing. I saw you, and I'm sorry. If I'd had a button, I'd have shocked your chair and woken you up, but I didn't. The speaker may think about that. The House Budget Office and all of the people here that you brag on all the time, is this the first time they've heard this budget? Because they were glued on your every word. I mean,
they were doing a critique to see where I messed up.
Well, I want to compliment them. They encouraged, y'all may have encouraged why he spoke so long. Mr. Chairman, I just, while you catch your breath and answer a couple of questions, if you will, you mentioned the word legacy early on in this presentation. And I don't know of another appropriations chair in this General Assembly in the history of it will leave a finer legacy than you will when you leave this place. How you've managed with passion the people's money, as we just alluded to, and how you've managed and dealt with the members, the public who come before you, and this staff is exceptional, and it speaks to the man you are and the beliefs you have. The last thing I would say, even maybe more important than that, is the compassion you've had and you have for the people of this state. As the pastor said this morning, you care and love your neighbor, and you've cared about them in your time here, and I know you will continue to do that. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to recognize a couple of members, if you will, there's a couple of questions that we have. With that, I'm going to recognize the gentleman from the 168th House District down on the coast, Representative Williams, for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Does the gentleman yield?
Absolutely.
Will you yield twice?
Well, it depends.
Before I ask the question that I rose to answer, let me echo the Majority Leader in saying that you have always been a gentleman. You have been more accessible than any appropriations chairman I've served with over the 20 years I've been here. You didn't always give the answer I wanted, but you were honest with your answer, and thank you and certainly your staff for their accessibility. My question is concerning private prisons. I just want to ask, is 100% of the money that has been mentioned for them going to salaries to ensure parity and help reduce the turnover?
Yes, sir. That is certainly what we're doing here. In that addition, it goes into the pockets of those COs that are working in those facilities, that live in those 4 communities that I mentioned earlier, so that they can take care of their families and raise their families, buy food to put on their table. It goes into their pocket. Yes, sir.
With one quick follow-up, thank you too. It's not something that flies above the radar, but thank you for the money for the prevention of suicide among veterans in this state.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, would you take another question?
One more.
Maybe a couple more, Mr. Chairman. That'll be quick. I'll encourage the members to be quick. I'd recognize the gentleman from the 155th who's already helped you, Chairman Perkle, for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
Is it not true that this budget provides flexibility to meet the federal matching requirements related to the infrastructure bill and also provides clarity in being compliant with the state-owned short line railroads?
Absolutely, it does. And, you know, somebody smarter than us and before us decided that it was a wise investment to invest in those state-owned short line railroads. And we have an obligation as a state to continue to make sure that they're maintained and to a level that's safe, efficient, and affordable to those needing to use them, cross them, or have anything to do with them. Yes, sir.
Will the gentleman for the yield?
Yes, sir.
Is it not further true that it has been an honor and a privilege to observe the dedication, the compassion, and hard work of the chairman, and to see lived out the motto of this state: wisdom, justice, and moderation? Is that not true, my friend?
Well, I'll let every member decide on their own on that one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like for you to take one more, maybe.
Yes, sir. Okay.
The lady in the back from the House District 139, Representative Bentley, has a question to your left.
To the Strawberry Queen. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Leader. Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Chairman England, for your work on this budget. I know you put a lot of hours in, and I certainly appreciate that. But for a point of clarity, I need a better understanding of the raises for state employees. Is something about a dollar amount that will be given on April 1st? I'm not really certain about that, but can you help me to understand what's going to happen on April 1st as it relates to state employees and this $5,000 raise? I just need to be really clear on that.
Sure, absolutely. Within the amended budget, if you recall, the $5,000 raise is handled kind of two ways. And it's all kind of about logistics and how that happens. So, and what the state employees will see on April 1st, or thereabouts, very close to that, will be a one-time payment of $3,750. And then from April 1st on, appearing in their paycheck, divided evenly from there until June 30th, will be an additional $1,250, which overall amounts to a $5,000 raise in this current fiscal year. So when you get to July 1, and doing it that way, coming to July 1, then there will be no change in their paycheck. The $5,000 then will be built in through this budget, through the paychecks all of next year. So we're doing it in a way that doesn't spike their paychecks for the last quarter, but puts them where they're going to be going forward, so they don't get to June 30th and all of a sudden see their paycheck drop because there was $5,000 trying to be pushed out in one quarter. It'll be done in a one-time payment, and then the other $1,250 will then be allocated to them over that remaining 3 months.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to call time on this last question. If you'll take it, one more from Representative Chairman David Knight from the 130 House District.
Is he the airplane man?
Yes.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir, I do.
First of all, to my friend, I want to say thank you. Good times and bad times the state has gone through, but it has gone through it with a steadfast hand. And that's to you, my friend, who has led this state through those good times and bad times. And that's a rough position on both sides of it, but you've done it fairly, and you've done it with all Georgians in mind. So I want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
And we're a better state for it. But
well, I've had, if you'll let me just, I've had some really good partners in the foxhole, yourself included, late Senator Jack Hill in the Senate, the current Chairman Blake Tillery in the Senate, as we went through the pandemic last year, all of you and many of you that are chairman of other committees now that have been subcommittee chairs have been in the foxhole with us, with our staff, and it's we couldn't do I couldn't do my job, I couldn't do this job if it hadn't been for folks like you and the others.
thank you, you're kind. This gentleman for a serious question.
Yes.
Isn't it true that this year, in regards to higher education, this is a very historic budget?
Yes.
And we have done some great things in regards to removing the special initiative fees. We've done some great things as far as resetting the Hope Scholarship so that better aligns with tuition fluctuations and getting everybody up to that 90% level. And isn't it true that this is going to save literally tens of thousands of students, anywhere from hundreds of dollars up to $2,000 and $3,000 a year in higher education?
It will, and I mentioned it a little bit, and I'm glad you asked that question, because I don't know that folks understand the importance of what is being done there in making sure that funding formula is fully funded. Those special institutional fees have been in place since, I think, 2008, am I correct? Are a considerable cost burden to families. So those will be going away. The university system had worked with us and worked with OPB over the fall to make sure that if we were able to do this, that those fees would go away. And so when I got the phone call that everybody had gotten to the right place on that back in the fall, that was a pretty happy day. So I'm glad to see it. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate it. I know that, again, a lot of folks need to go a long ways to get home before the weather hits. But again, thank you to everyone for your hard work in this. We may not have gotten everything that you wanted, but we tried to get some of what you wanted within this document. Mr. Chairman, I just yield the well at this time and ask everyone's favorable consideration on House Bill 911. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The gentleman has yielded the well. We do have another speaker. The lady from the 105th, Representative McLeod, speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank everyone that worked on this budget, and I want to thank Chairman England for always answering my question, and I had a few. And I also want to thank the Biden administration for the funds that have come down to the state of Georgia from the federal government. I remember my first day in session in 2019, and the speaker stated, "Our most important job in this House is to pass a budget for the state of Georgia. The budget lays out our priorities." The budget has some really good stuff in it, like mental health funding, maternal mortality, and sickle cell, and so much more. But the largest budget item is education. It is a disservice to our children, our teachers, and our parents to state that we have fully funded the quality basic education formula since the last time it was updated was 1985, and we are now in 2022. I've offered a pilot program in HB 71 to look at this formula so we can really truly address all the issues that our students and our teachers are facing in public schools. In this budget, there is an increase in the private prisons funds. It went from $127 million to about $140 million. This ensures that we have a thriving school-to-prison pipeline with nice, warm bodies. Let's talk about the #1 state to do business. But it's not the #1 state for employees and workers. The callousness of this, what happened with the labor commissioner, showed poor leadership during a pandemic, and our constituents felt the blunt of the dereliction of duty by the labor commissioner. Many lost their homes, couldn't afford food and medicine because they lost their jobs due to no fault of their own and got no relief from unemployment. I am still getting calls from people who are still waiting. Decisions are being made to strip the power from the next labor commissioner because of the failure of his or her predecessor. Staff, furniture, equipment, workforce development are all being moved to the technical college system. HB 1331 has the appearance of streamlining, but if you look closer, it doesn't allow for the new commissioner to have his or her input in this constitutional office. I'll end here where I began. Our budget is about our priorities. The priorities we invest, the priorities should always be about the people who invest their money in our government, the taxpayer. I yield the well.
The lady has yielded the well. The chair now recognizes Chairman England for a motion.
Hold on, let me find the script.
We got all day. You've taken most of it. There is a little bit of daylight left, but go ahead, take your time.
I know. Mr. Chairman, I move that that House Bill 911 do pass by committee substitute.
The gentleman has moved. Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 150th House District, Representative Hatchett.
Thank you,
Mr.
Chair. It's my honor to second the motion of the 23 budget, HB 911.
Representative Hatchett seconds the motion. At this time, we'll call the question on House Bill 911. All in favor will say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. It's very clear the ayes have it. House Bill 911 passes by committee substitute. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from the 116th, Chairman England.
Mr. Chairman, as chairman of the Committee of the Whole House, you are instructed to report the action of the Committee of the Whole House to the House.
chair recognizes the majority leader of the House, Leader Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole House has had under consideration House Bill 911 and has instructed me as its chairman to report the same back to the House with the recommendation that House Bill 911 do pass by committee substitute.
The report of the chairman of the Committee of the Whole House is received. The Committee of the Whole House has had under consideration House Bill 911 and has reported the same back to the House with a recommendation that House Bill 911 do pass by committee substitute. Before I dissolve the Committee of the Whole House, let me add my gratitude to the great job over the last, 10, 11 years, 12 years that's already been said about Chairman England. When I asked him to chair this committee back then, we were in a tough time financially. And so we've been through the good times and we've been through the bad. And you've done an excellent job. And I value the job that you've done. You brought credit on this House. You've rendered great service to the people of Georgia, and you've been my friend. The Committee of the Whole House is hereby dissolved. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The previous question is ordered. Chair hears no objection, so the previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Chairman Petrie rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, is it not true that under...
What purpose
I'm sorry, parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
State your inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, is it not true that under the leadership of Chairman England, our Medicaid budget in this state has grown from $1.8 billion in state dollars to $2.2 billion in state dollars, more than doubling as we have expanded services to the aged, the blind, the disabled, the intellectually disabled, all across this state, the people that Medicaid indeed was created for. Is that not true?
I believe those numbers to be accurate. Have all members now voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of House Bill 911. The ayes are 155. The nays are 3. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed, and this House has adopted the House version of the fiscal year 23 budget. All right, back. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 1441.
House Bill 1441 by Representative Collins, the 68th, be entitled an act to amend Chapter 38 and Title 43 of the Fiscal Code of Georgia Annotated relating to operators of private detective businesses and private security businesses, so as to exempt a certified police officer employed by a licensed private detective business or private security business as an independent contractor from the requirements of said chapter. This bill I refer to the Committee on Regulated Industries. That committee recommends that this bill do pass.
Chair recognizes Chairman Collins to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House, I bring before you today House Bill 1441. It's a very simple bill. All it does is it exempts post-certified police officers, peace officers in our state from having to register with the Secretary of State's office to work for a private security firm. 23 other states in our nation do this. It's just a good housekeeping measure and also eliminates some red tape. I'll stand for questions if there are any, Mr. Speaker.
You have no questions.
I yield the well. Thank you. Ask for your favorable consideration of House Bill 1441.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 1441. The ayes are 155, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 1069. House Bill 1069.
House Bill 1069 by Representative Williamson of the 115th to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 3 of Title 37 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating examination treatment for mental illness so as to provide for the licensure of adult mental health programs. This bill having referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Williamson to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr.